Well, as expected, the internet has come and given us a reason to smile as we come to the end of a very difficult year. Some of our favorite Christmas carols have been given the COVID treatment. There's "Have yourself a Merry COVID Christmas, let your mask be tight," or I can't smell, sense is gone away." It's bad taste, isn't it? Or what about "Deck the halls with sanitizer, fa la 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 la, until we get a cure from Pfizer, fa la 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 la." You know, if we don't laugh, we're going to cry. Here we are, singing Christmas carols in our homes. It's wonderful that we can do that, and the band's been amazing, but it's not the way it's supposed to be. We should be here together, using our glow sticks and singing with gusto, with our Christmas hats on. Unfortunately, we're not able to do that at the moment. This is going to be one of the most un-Christmassy Christmases ever. And all of the havoc in the world has been caused by the most minute little germ. So tiny is this little virus that you need 8,000 of these molecules bunched together just to see 1 millimeter of virus. It's crazy, isn't it? So it's not surprising that the one bit of good news, the one bit of light at the end of the tunnel is the announcement of the vaccine. The vaccine is arriving, it's coming. And it's incredible that we've managed to pull not just one vaccine together, but several. And really it's going to be a game changer. It's going to be something that I hope will bring us some sort of normality again. The thing is, though, however much the vaccine helps with COVID, it's just a matter of time before another nasty bug comes along. Even if the COVID bug is dealt with, we've got other kind of issues that we can't escape. And no amount of pharmaceutical ingenuity or political will is going to get rid of the deeper problems that we're still going to be left with. See, viruses are just one symptom of a much bigger problem. And it's that problem that connects us to the Christmas story. What we discover as we come to the Bible is the world was not always in the mess that it's in at the moment. God made this world in the beginning to be perfect. He made it with no viruses, no sicknesses, no pain, no suffering. Nobody got sick in the beginning. Everything was perfect. Everything worked perfectly. God was in charge, and the people that He'd made lived in obedience to Him. And because they did that, everything was in harmony. But tragically, it didn't stay that way for long. For whatever reason, the people that God had made decided that although they were living in a perfect paradise, they weren't entirely satisfied with the way things were. They thought perhaps if they were in charge of their own lives, making their own decisions, deciding what was good and bad, that things might be even better. It was a tragic, tragic mistake. You can read about it in the opening chapters of the Bible. And from that moment on, as they choose to turn their backs on God's authority over them, the perfect world that God has made becomes fractured and broken. See, that's what happens when you turn your back on your Creator and when you go the other way. The whole created order is turned upside down. One of the things that happens from that moment on is that the Bible tells us people begin to die. They get sick, they get old. They're struck down by germs and diseases that you can't even see with the naked eye. You know, the reason that we have COVID-19 and TB and malaria and all these other horrible sicknesses is because there's a deeper problem that is a result of sin entering the world. The world is now fallen and broken and doesn't work the way it was intended to. Human sin has affected everything. You know, when most people think about sin, they think of bad things that people do. But sin is deeper than that. Sin is our natural instinct to want to run our own lives apart from God. Sin is everything that we do that goes against God's good design for us. And sin breaks and it destroys and it ruins the good lives that we try to make for ourselves. And the problem with sin is there is no vaccine against it. Nobody is able to withstand the effects of sin. Now, I needed to sketch that little background because if we're going to understand the Christmas story and the good news that it is, we've got to understand the background leading up to Christmas. Christmas is the story of God bringing a cure into a world racked by sin. You know, we've been spending this Christmas looking at the ancient book of Isaiah. And I just want to, for a few moments, take us to a chapter 53, where we look ahead 700 years into the future when Jesus would arrive. So this is written 700 years before Jesus comes, and remarkably, as you'll see, it speaks so clearly about his coming. Let's have a look at it together. I'll read it for us, and I'll just make a few comments. Isaiah 53, verse 1 to 5. Who has believed our message? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces, he was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. You know, when Jesus arrived, no one thought much about him. It was just another baby born to another Middle Eastern family. He cried, he ate, he did other things that babies do. No one paid much attention except a few shepherds in the beginning, and a couple of years later, a strange bunch of astrologers from the east who arrived. As he grew up, there were no obvious signs that this boy was special. He was just an ordinary kid. He probably did well at school. Maybe he did well at sport. We really don't know. It does seem that he wasn't a particularly handsome boy. The passage tells us that he had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. In other words, this was no blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus that you see so often in children's books and on Christmas cards. And as he got older, he would have worked in his father's carpentry business. He would have known the workshop environment. He would have been good with his hands. But this ordinary man would grow up to change the world. You see, behind that outward appearance, there was nothing ordinary about Jesus. He was the one that God had sent into this world to provide the cure to our greatest sickness. Jesus first got noticed by the world around the age of 30, and not in a good way. As he began his public ministry, he began to speak out about what God was doing, and he began to give little glimpses of what God would one day do by healing the sick and casting out evil spirits and even raising the dead on occasion. As he did that, the authorities were not happy at all about this. They got really upset. Listen to what Isaiah says in verse 3. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain, like one from whom people hide their faces. He was despised, and we held him in low esteem. It's a crazy thing to think that someone who was doing so much good would be so passionately hated. But you see, when you come announcing the arrival of another kingdom, when you come pointing out the abuses within the religious system, those in authority are not going to like you. You're going to be unpopular. And so it ended badly for Jesus, or so it seemed. He was eventually arrested on fake charges. He was tried by a biased court, and he was sentenced to death. And so at the age of around 33, Jesus' short life on earth came to an end. Except that's not the end of the story. This, you see, was no accident at all. Jesus dying was no accident at all. It was part of God's plan to provide that cure that God had been working towards from the beginning. In fact, without realizing it, the authorities actually played into God's hands by placing Jesus on that cross. Jesus' death was the way that God was going to bring the cure, and so fix the world and the mess that the world found itself in. Let's read again from verse 4. It says, surely he, that's Jesus, took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Can you see that it's describing Jesus' death? But why, according to these verses, did Jesus endure that pain and endure that suffering? Why was he pierced? Why did God allow him to be crushed? Did you see it? He took up our pain. He bore our suffering. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Jesus was dying in our place. In fact, that's the whole reason he came into this world in the first place. He was born to die as a way to rescue us from that terminal disease of sin. And as Jesus died on the cross, he was paying the penalty that our sin deserved. The punishment for our rebellion against a holy and perfect God is that we rightly deserve death. But God loves us way too much to allow sin and death to have the final say. And so he himself steps into this world. Jesus comes and becomes like one of us, taking our punishment upon himself so that we don't have to. And to the authorities' astonishment and the religious leaders' horror, Jesus rose again from the dead 3 days later, showing that the price had been fully paid, that death had been permanently defeated once and for all. And that is why Christmas is such good news. Verse 5 says this: the punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. A vaccine is good news, but a vaccine is no cure. Whenever something bad like this coronavirus thing happens, it's supposed to make us realize that there is a deeper and a bigger problem that we can't fix ourselves. God allows us to see these things and to experience these things in order to try and get our attention, to show us how much we need him to rescue us. Jesus came not to give us a vaccine, but to offer us a permanent cure. And that permanent cure is available today, and it's available to you if you would accept it and receive it. Jesus has done it all. He has fixed our deepest problem. And that is why Christmas is worth celebrating. And one day soon, the Bible tells us, Jesus will return, and when he does, he will remake this broken world into a brand new, perfect world, free forever of suffering and pain and heartache. You will give him the name Jesus, the angel said, because he will save his people from their sins. Merry Christmas, everyone.